So, sorry, I had more people join. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Emma. And just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We'll do a Q&A at the end, so just hold all of your questions. The chat is live, so you can throw them in the chat as well. And we will email the recording to everybody at the end, or tomorrow when it's uploaded and good to go. And then again, just please stay muted with the microphone off until the very end. So just very quickly, Backlog is my little company, and we are putting on this webinar on archival supplies. We're based in St. Louis, and we're an archival consulting firm that specializes in helping smaller institutions bridge the digital divide, bring their collections online. So we do archival consulting, so archival needs assessments to help you build a roadmap for where your archives can go. Again, we work with digitization workflows. We also do platform hosting, and then genealogy research as well. And I'm Emma. I worked as a university archivist for 5 years before being laid off during the pandemic. And I've been working with a lot of small historical societies to bring their collections online. And then this is Jenna, and I will pass it over to her.
Thanks. So I'm Jenna. I'm currently a museum archivist, but for almost 10 years before that, I was a university archivist. I was on my own. I was part of the library, and I got this job right out of grad school. So I'd only ever had part-time jobs or internships before. So my supplies were just there. And if I needed more folders, I found an adult. And so it was quite a surprise to have my own budget and find that I didn't know that there were so many different things that were necessary for actually taking care of archival materials. Next slide, please. So I want to get started by explaining how I'm going to use archival versus how it tends to be used in marketing. So if you go to like a craft store or something and you see something described as archival, it's not necessarily to a standard that our archival materials should be housed in. It might just mean like it's nice, it's luxury, it's made with nice paper, it's a scrapbook or something like that. It's not a standard, it's not a certification, it's not like something being certified organic. It's really just a marketing term. So it's important to know more about the materials that you're using to put your collections in. Using the right materials can save your collections. And this is actually a picture of a box that survived a ceiling collapse at one of my jobs. We're replacing all of the boxes, but the papers are pretty much okay, even though they've got lots of like dust and water damage and mold, but they were I will say archival here because I mean to the standard that archivists and conservators agree is the best for this is the best standard, best practice for our collections. So because we were using archival housing, the stuff survived. Next slide, please. So having the right materials and putting the materials into the housing correctly protects them from light, moisture, pests, like things that eat paper, handling, shelf wear, and contaminants. So everything from pollution to, this is a picture of papers that were not stored correctly in our archival housing. So they've got that permanent curve now. So it's not just about the types of materials that you use, but using them correctly that's necessary to actually take care of your collections. Next slide, please. So acidity is probably the biggest thing most of us are dealing with our any paper-based collection, and it's also the easiest to address. I think we're all pretty familiar with the idea of something being acid-free paper, acid-free boxes. But where does this acid come from? It comes from plant matter decay. So like newsprint has, it gets that brown yellow, and just gets worse and worse and more brittle because it has a higher content of lignin, which is like tree material, versus like cotton rag paper is mostly made from cotton fibers rather than tree fibers. And so those happen to last longer, even though obviously all of it is plant matter. So external contaminants and the breakdown of plastic can also contribute to this. So when you choose archival housing for paper, you're often going to be looking for buffering. So buffered folders, buffered boxes, buffered envelopes or sleeves or other types of enclosure. And what that means is that there's a little bit of alkaline chalk. I think it's calcium, I want to say carbonate. I would have understood high school chemistry a lot better and been more interested in it if they had framed it as how to protect archival materials. But the presence of that alkaline material in the paper balances the pH, so to make the paper materials within last longer. Now, obviously, nothing is forever. You need to replace things every so often. You know, like with my ceiling collapse situation, we did replace all of the boxes so that the materials are going to be in clean housing, fresh alkaline. So, you know, nothing is forever, but balancing the pH will lead to longevity with your archival materials. So the more cellulose, the more lignin that's in paper, the more acidic it is, but not all paper-based materials require buffering. And so based on what's in your collection, what you're trying to store, look what is best for those materials. So for example, like blueprints don't require buffering. It's something to do with the way that they're printed. A conservator could tell you all of these things exactly, but if you can't get buffering because it is more expensive, at least acid-free, lignin-free is a really good start. Next slide, please. So when you're shopping for archival materials, look for details about what you're buying, not just the word archival. Look for particular specs. Some good keywords beyond acid-free are the photographic activity test, or the PAT. So if something has passed the PAT test, that means that it has undergone really rigorous testing in like high heat, high humidity, to test how well it protects materials that are inside it, so like a folder or a box. Inert, when you're talking about any sort of plastic, that means that it is not going to off-gas or break down over time. Look for details about the pH. A lot of times when you're shopping for materials that are like folders or boxes, they will actually give the pH, especially if it's buffered. And the pH will shift over time, but this is what you're starting with. So you'll know, okay, if things get more acidic, I can balance that out with buffering. And I'll talk a little bit more about plastics in later slides, but polypropylene is a type of plastic that is generally inert. So for things like photo sleeves, that could be a good material to use, as well as, of course, paper sleeves. Next slide, please. So things to avoid, any products without these details about exactly what it's made out of, the type of plastic, the type of paper, the pH, any unknown plastics. When I have talked about archives in person, I will pass around things I have found in collections. So plastic sleeves that had slides in them that have gotten yellow and either brittle or warped over time. And so any chemicals that are going to leach out of that plastic are going to get into your collections. So avoid any bizarre plastics or any unknown plastics, as well as PVC or vinyl. So if you're looking, say, at like document sleeves that you would put like paper in, you put it in a binder, sometimes that's PVC, and that will get brittle, it will acidify, like it will be unpleasant. If I could ban one thing from, I don't know, all offices, it would actually be those plastic comb bindings that sometimes when a firm will put out like a report, they'll comb bind it. Those get so brittle over time that, if you pull one of those reports from the 80s, it will just snap. All the little combs just snap, and that's not good for your collections. It's not good for your fingers. and can be quite painful. So any mysterious plastics are not going to be great for your collection. And similarly, there are some boxes and other types of housing that are more colorful, that have some sort of like bleed resistant dye in them, and they're made by the same suppliers that archivists use all the time. But generally, any colorful or dyed products, you know, like colorful folders, colorful boxes, things like that, you want to stay away from. It can be really useful, you know, in an office to say color code all of your folders. So temporarily, you know, do whatever, or to have things in binders. But when it comes to long-term archival storage, it's important to get away from the convenient office products and to actually use archivally sound housing. Next slide, please. So in shopping for boxes, you may have seen a zillion different terms for different types of boxes, some of which are pictured here. Hollinger box is probably the most common. Hollinger is a company that makes those boxes with the metal corners. So it's kind of like any box with a metal edge often gets called a Hollinger box because the company is literally called Hollinger Metal Edge. But it's kind of like Kleenex, like a facial tissue is not all facial tissues are Kleenexes, not all metal edge boxes are Hollinger boxes, but they are the inventor and major supplier of those type of boxes. So usually they're document cases, which are you know, they're about 1/2 a foot letter or legal size. You can also get half ones that are really skinny. But they make boxes in all kinds of different sizes. You might need a flat box for like prints or posters, or smaller boxes for media or photographs. So Hollinger is kind of, like I said, like Kleenex. It's generally a term used very broadly to refer to a box with a metal edge. A document case, you know, it's for storing documents, usually letter or legal size. Those big, I think outside of archives, often referred to as a banker's box. They're those records cartons that are like usually 12 by 15. So it's a record carton. They're also called a page box sometimes, which is not something I've ever encountered in any of my jobs. But then I saw like I would see other people refer to page boxes, and I was like, what is that? So same thing I've been using, just a different term for it. A clamshell box, like the name says, any box where the top and the bottom are attached, and so it closes like a clam. A phase box is usually is a box for book storage. So it's usually like 4 flaps that you kind of fold around the book. A drop front box would be a flat box where if you want to be able to look at the contents of the box, you can kind of pull the front forward. It's not attached on those corners. And a Solander box is similar to a clamshell box. It's just usually a lot heavier. And that was also something I had not encountered until I started working in museums. They're usually, in my experience, for more valuable things because they need much sturdier storage. So that's just a quick rundown of some of the phrases that you might encounter when you just want to buy a box. And when you buy boxes, a lot of times they're made to spec. So you can often get custom boxes if you have stuff that's a weird size. Next slide, please. So you're also going to encounter what type of board. What do you want your boxes to be made out of? So this is just a picture from Tallis, which is an archival supplier. E-flute and B-flute cardboard are the most common thicknesses I see. So I think cardboard corrugation goes from like A to E or something like that. A is the thickest. So usually you can choose between B, that's a bit thicker. That's more like a normal corrugated cardboard box that you would get, you know, at U-Haul or something. E-flute is quite thin. There's also a barrier board, which isn't corrugated. It's just like a really heavy board. Like if you think of like something the thickness of like the mat in a picture that's been framed, it's about the same thickness. So you can get Hollinger boxes made out of barrier board. It's usually a bit of like a sheen to it. I mean, you can get some particular coatings, like I think Duracoat is one of them, on barrier board that helps prevent moisture from getting into the board. You can also get boxes that are a corrugated plastic. So obviously those would be great in like a disaster situation. I don't often see those used for long-term storage, like even if they are inert, archivally safe plastics, just because we don't need that much plastic in our lives, but that is an option. Next slide, please. So when it comes to fasteners, you're gonna encounter, and I'm sure we've all encountered, so much rust and corrosion and grossness from paper clips and other types of metal fasteners and staples and rubber bands, all horrible. So this is actually a picture of something I took apart maybe 2 weeks ago. They actually had these metal screws through the paper and the cover, and it had just all corroded, and it was leaving all this like green dust everywhere. And I was just like, the screw was falling apart as I was trying to unscrew it. So some people prefer not to replace paper clips or pull out staples or anything like that. That is, there's a whole discourse around MPLP, more product, less process. Like, do you really need to replace all of these things? So kind of up to you. It's based on the condition of your collections, the amount of time you have. I definitely wouldn't start using paper clips in a collection if they haven't had paper clips before. If you need to bind some things together, or like in a folder, here are some things that were clipped together. I want to indicate to the user that these things go together. You can always make just a paper jacket. Instead of you just fold the paper, get larger paper, fold it in half to just indicate to the researcher that these are things that go together. I've talked about the plastic combs before. I hate rubber bands. They can ruin your collection, or a paper in your collection, because as they dry out and get brittle, they will stick to the paper, and when you try to remove them, sometimes they will tear the paper or pull up some of the ink. So review your collections for some of these problems. And some places will use plastic paper clips instead. Those are often very colorful, and conservators aren't really sure in the long term if those are going to be okay. I mean, certainly if that's like what you enjoy using and it makes your job easier, go for it. But if you don't want to buy a bunch of fancy supplies, making paper jackets to hold stuff together is just fine. So next slide, please. So I've done lots of warning about plastics. So some things that tend to be more inert be Melanix or Mylar, which are brand names for archival polyester. Polypropylene, which is actually in the picture, it's a photo sleeve that's made out of polypropylene, and polyethylene are generally inert. When I first started my first archives job, I was trying to identify a lot of the plastic housing that had been used by offices that had then transferred the stuff to the archives. And sometimes the best and most, I don't even want to call it efficient, but the most surefire way, literally, to identify what a plastic is to set it on fire and see how it reacts. So obviously I wasn't going to do that. So I ended up replacing a lot of plastic because I just wasn't sure. So as I said before, avoid PVC and vinyl. If you've ever had an old 3-ring binder, 3-ring binders have the plastic wrapped around cardboard, and as that plastic breaks down, it gets sticky. Usually that tends to be PVC, and that's just what happens over time. So avoid using that. And probably, this is familiar to a lot of you. Why we don't laminate things in archives is because that plastic will break down over time, and it will break down the thing that it has laminated. So you might still have a good sheet of plastic, but there will be nothing in it, or it'll just be all yellow. So, use caution when you're buying anything to put your collection in that's plastic. Next slide, please. So when it comes to labeling your stuff, use pencil to label your folders. there are actually, I didn't put this in the slide, but if you're labeling the backs of photos or anything, I recommend Stabilo pencils. So it's like, well, it's Stabilo. And I think that's a brand name, but there are other similar really soft pencils. So you're not, poking and putting pressure on the back of the item. So that's if you have to label directly on the object, I recommend using those. They're very soft. If you have to use ink to label like your enclosures, consider, is the surface porous or is it slick? How stable is the ink? Is that going to fade over time or discolor? And does it meet toxicity standards? So there have been a lot of inks used over time that have faded away or gotten gross or might have weird chemicals in them. So those are just things to consider. How is it affecting your health as well as the health of your collection? Next slide, please. So if you are putting sticky labels on any of your boxes, I recommend using foil-backed labels. And I'm not entirely sure of the chemistry here, but the foil also keeps any pressure from the writing from getting onto, from like damaging the box or the folder. And if you have an irregularly shaped object that you're not really sure how to house or label, making paper tags with undyed paper and undyed cotton string is pretty standard. So if you're like labeling furniture, tying tags on things so you don't have to write, an accession number on the object is helpful. Oh yeah, I see a comment using 100% cotton embroidery floss. Yeah, also, yeah, and this person's a conservator, so probably you definitely know more than I do. I'm now working in an environment where we actually have a separate conservation team, and I'm learning so much. So next slide, please. So this will become a story time. So sometimes you have to pad things because you have objects that aren't just paper. So you have to, think about if you're getting tissue paper, do you need buffered or unbuffered? If you're going to be using any sort of foam, go to your archival suppliers, because there are types of foam that are safer to use around, say, like glass plate negatives or something like that. Glassine is also, it's like, it feels almost like wax paper. Again, I'm not super sure of like the chemistry. So that is another thing that you can use for wrapping. And yes, I will get to a list of archival suppliers at the end of this. Glassine does need to be replaced more. And I've also read that when you're working with paintings, it's not good for long-term storage of paintings. So you might be looking at this picture and thinking, what on earth is that? Yes, I mentioned not to use buffered things on blueprints earlier. So this picture is a carriage hitch. So and if you could go to the next slide, please. So someone showed up in my office at my last job, and there was a carriage hitch that had been found when a building was being renovated. And they were like, do you want this? And I was like, well, no, but yes. So might kind of be able to see it's wooden, but some of it is coated in leather. There's a leather strap on it, and then the ends are metal, but the leather is corroding. And it's not just one cylindrical pole, it was kind of more bulbous in the middle and then narrowed out and tapered at the ends. So I didn't want it to just rest in the box. So me with my just guessing how I could try to store this, I wanted it to be, not touching the box. The most stable part of the object is the metal ends. So I made these little triangular, almost like bookends, and cut slots in them for the metal to go into, padded that out so that the object wouldn't move in the box. I think this was a box made for like textile rolls or something like that. And then I put lots of notes on it, like explaining what it was, where it was really fragile, only touch the metal ends if you have to handle it, but also just please don't handle it. So it's stable. Next slide, please. So if you're going to be using adhesives, you're probably only going to be using them on the enclosures rather than any objects themselves. So any if you were to be actually like repairing a document, any conservation or preservation actions should always be reversible. So that's why we're not just like gluing and taping stuff willy-nilly. So like wheat paste is something that is used for repairs. If you are using any sort of glue to like build housing, you know, like make a box, make sure that it's pH neutral. Or use archivally sound tape. So there's like paper tape. It's almost like, it feels almost like a washi tape if you ever used like a decorative tape, or linen tape, that could be good for like building box corners. So that's something that's often used by framers when they're framing artwork. So you know, don't glue your stuff together, but if if you are shopping for archival materials, you might see some adhesives for sale and think, what's going on here? So they're obviously needed for building your enclosure sometimes. Next slide, please. So these are actually boxes. They look like Hollinger boxes and they're made out of barrier board that hold our LPs, like records. So you know, a lot of the media that we use is weird materials, weird plastics. So those need rehousing too. So analog audio and video, you know, VHS tapes, cassette tapes, reels. If you have any reels in your collection, like even if you like don't really want to think about them, you know, you don't have a projector, you just like, they could be disintegrating. So like if they smell vinegary, call an AV conservator. And or get them into a freezer. So, but that is a topic for another day. Your optical media like CDs and DVDs, they might be I've gotten like full-on boxes of loose CDs sent to the archives before. So making sure that those things are stored safely where they're not going to get scratched, using all I can think of is the word Teflar. Tyvek, there we go. Tyvek sleeves are really great for CDs or DVDs. And also you might have hard drives or floppy disks in your collection, making sure that those are in stable housing and, you know, good environmental conditions so that they are not going to deteriorate as quickly. That's really important too. Next slide, please. So you can DIY your way through a lot of this stuff. You can make your own enclosures. There are a lot of really great instructions online. I've got one URL here from Gaylord, but there's also lots of instructional videos just like on YouTube, and lots of workshops that various conservators do on how to build your own enclosures. So if you know, if you can buy like this, so the picture here is a 4-flap enclosure that I made for a really thin pamphlet-y magazine brochure thing that had a binding that was falling apart. You can buy 4-flap enclosures that are where it's actually just cut into like the plus or cross shape and you just fold it as you need to. I just made this out of folder stock. I bought a huge roll of folder stock and I would just cut things, you know, whether it's box parts or folders to whatever size I needed and use an archivally sound double-sided tape to attach them. So I think you can see like one of my tapes I've got on in that picture. And if you are, you know, DIYing your way to the sun and trying to protect your collections on a budget, make your investments on the highest quality materials for the things that actually touch the collections. So maybe you're not buying archival boxes, but if your folders are, you know, buffered as needed, then that's something. I know that this can be an incredibly costly endeavor to replace all of your housing and start making these investments. So if you need to sort of stage the way that you rehouse your collection, start with the things that are actually touching the materials. Next slide, please. So some tools that you might find useful, a cutting mat. I love a self-healing cutting mat. If you're going to be using any knives, utility knives, A metal ruler is also really nice. There are some that actually kind of have a handle that you can put your hand behind, and they're really heavy. So if you're cutting something on your cutting mat, you can just pull it along, pull the blade along, and it's really smooth. Bone folders, which aren't necessarily bone, they can be plastic or bamboo for getting really sharp folds in your boxes and folders and things that you're making. Brushes to get rid of dust and erase. Getting good erasers from, like, use the ones that the artists are using, because I mean, I think we've all had like pencil erasers that are too old and the rubber has just like dried out and you can't erase anymore. Get some nice big soft ones. It's really satisfying. And I love having a Caselli spatula, which are those little metal spatulas that you see archivists use sometimes. Really great for picking off bits of rubber bands. So that's, if you're putting together your own little station, as I have done, it's good to have some tools like this. Next slide, please. So where are you going to get this stuff? So we are not sponsored by any of these brands, and there are others as well. University Products is located in New England. So if you happen to be in New England, you can get a deal on shipping. Blick Art Materials or other art suppliers often have a lot of the same materials that archival suppliers will have, because artists also want to protect their stuff. Gaylord, which has archival in the name, but they mean it, is a really big supplier. They can be more expensive, but especially if you are an educational institution or a nonprofit, find out if you can get a discount from them. Because I worked at a university at one time, and I don't know how we had a discount through them, but we did. Some others are Talus, Lineco. I don't have it on the slide, but Demco. There are some other ones that are like archival noun. And if you have a particular brand of thing that you like that you're ordering through Gaylord or University Products, sometimes you can buy right from the manufacturer. So like Print File is an example. They do a lot of photo sleeves, and you can buy them in much larger volume right from the Print File website. There's also something called Bags Unlimited, and I'm not really sure of how they're vetting their stuff, but that's another option. So if you are setting up an account with any supplier, it could be, I mean, regardless of whether you're buying archival supplies, if you're going to Home Depot, if you're a nonprofit, make sure you set up a tax exempt account. It always is a pain. But it will save you money in the long run, and none of us have the budgets that we would like to have. So it's worth the effort to make sure that you've established your nonprofit status when you're buying stuff. So next slide, please. So when you've decided what you're going to buy, where you're going to buy it, and now it's getting shipped to you, think about where it's going to show up. Do you have a loading dock? Who's receiving your mail? Like physically receiving it. Are you okay with things getting left on like your front step of your office? Or because sometimes the boxes are very large. Things like Hollinger boxes will come assembled, so you'll have a gigantic box with like 10 smaller boxes in it. Because a lot of supplies are built, a lot of housing is built to spec, delivery might take a few weeks, so it's hard to rush these things. And always compare the contents of your boxes to the receipt. Which is, not even necessarily common sense, but because a lot of things are often back ordered, built to spec, you might get one shipment in many different boxes, or they might ship part of what you've ordered. Like you've ordered 20 boxes, they can only send 16. So that was something that I learned when I started my first archives job, that the getting in supplies was going to be complicated, and I needed to keep track. Okay, yes, I have received every single thing that I've ordered. It was just over the course of a month and 3 boxes. So that is my crash course, and sometimes you have to buy things. I think there's been I've gotten a lot of pop-ups, so I think there's been quite a lively chat. So we'll move into the Q&A session and the what's next section of the session.
Yeah, it hasn't so much been questions in the chat, it's just commentary.
Oh, okay. Ideas. So end of next month, just in time for spooky season. So I'm going to be doing a handwriting, a follow-up to my earlier this spring summer webinar on handwriting. I did history of handwriting, mostly in English, starting from like the Romans through now. But I'm really going to be focusing on 19th century handwriting, because there were a lot of changes culturally and technologically that led to a lot of changes in how people wrote. There's a lot more writing happening, more people were doing it, and there were specific styles being generated for business and for education. And so we're just going to have a fun time looking at some old letters and stuff. So that will be October 30th.
And then in November, we're going to do a webinar on elevating visitor experiences with interactive exhibits. So kind of going over what is possible, kind of with tablets and other forms of screens. And then we've already got a couple of questions in the chat. Do you want me to read them, or do you have your chat open, Jenna?
I've just opened it. Okay. All right. Oh, Rime is a textile. Oh, I never heard of this. Was found to be helpful after floods in Alberta, for tissue stuck to because the tissue stuck to textiles. That's interesting. So I did not know that. I'll have to look that up. Rime, just R-E-M-A-Y. Sorry, I'm just reading down through. Another person says, I'm a real fan of using Tyvek tape for covering the open corrugations in board edges, prevents dirt and dust and bugs from coming in. Okay, yeah. And to cover any openings in storage boxes that are sold folded for shipping. Okay. You can tack box corners closed using 1/8 inch polyester ribbon in DIY boxes instead of using adhesives. But yeah, I think I've done that. I made tiny boxes once for little audio reels. And yeah, I did like little origami boxes and just taped the corners. Sheets of Tyvek are also good for textile storage because it's waterproof but breathable. Yeah, also good. They make really light sort of hazmat-y type suits out of Tyvek too. Yeah, I've seen some used for covering shelving. Oh, in Canada, Carriage-McLean is another supplier. Okay, Gaylord only ships north of the US border for $5,000. $5,000 orders or higher. Okay, so I didn't know that. So that's good to know. Carriage-McLean. Oh, okay. Oh, I was thinking of a different type of tacking. Okay, now I'm seeing tapestry needles used to do the tacking usually, and all helps. Okay, yep. Yes, yeah, and inspecting boxes, large ones are easily damaged. Okay. Oh, question about my mother. Okay. Question, my mother has a photograph that was taken in the 1880s or 1890s. The image is on metal and has flaked off to some degree, mostly at the edges. The photograph does not have a case or package. What are your recommendations for transporting the photograph by car and for storage? So sorry, I'm just making sure that no one else has also answered the question. I recently had to box up some glass plate negatives. And so without knowing exactly like what type of metal print photograph that is, I would make a paper enclosure for the photograph and then encase that in, I like Volara foam. It's VOLARA, to actually pad it and then have it in a box. So and have it padded out in the box so that it doesn't move. So not just, okay, it's wrapped in foam, but it's in a big box. So have a box that's about the same size. You might have to order or build a custom one. But have an enclosure for making sure that the flaking doesn't get any worse. And then the foam padding for the shock absorption. And once you also have the sort of archivally safe stuff actually touching your object, if you then get involved with some bubble wrap for temporary transportation, like that's okay. I wouldn't recommend it for long-term storage, but it's better to not have stuff move around.
Okay, Jenna, we have another question that is, How would you recommend starting to purchase archival materials if you've never done it? Is there a list of must-haves somewhere?
I don't know about a list of must-haves, but I guess it depends on really on your collection. Like, what are you looking to store? So if you have mostly documents that are in like gross old cardboard boxes, then you're going to want to buy folders and document cases. If you have a lot of photographs, then you're going to want to decide how you want to store those. Are you going to do polypropylene sleeves? Are you going to do paper envelopes? What kind of boxes do you want? And if you have other types, if you have a lot of media, then you're going to want to get like boxes for reels or tapes or VHS. It really just depends on what you're prioritizing in rehousing in your collection and the types of materials that you have coming in.
And I'll just read off a couple of questions since the chat's pretty lively.
Okay, yeah, I'm not scrolling fast enough.
Yeah. In our institution, we're using a metal, it says pastener to bind documents together. I know that it can cause rust/damage in our documents. What can we use in exchange of, it says metal pastener, but I think they meant fastener to bind documents together. This is a DM. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So is it for like large volumes of paper or okay. So kind of, I mean, it depends on what you're doing. I think just separate folders for separate types of documents, or I mentioned the paper jackets earlier, just, folding a piece. If you've got a longer piece of paper, it's nice, like if you're working with letter size documents, get legal size paper, just make a jacket around it. And if it is a matter of like removing all of your fasteners from your entire collection, that's going to take a really long time. I wouldn't recommend introducing new metal to the collection.
Okay. Another question is there a place to buy larger quantities of polypropylene L sleeves for letters?
I don't know. I'm not sure of any sort of quantity. I'm not sure what quantities those are usually sold in, because I think I've only ever made them.
Okay. Another question is, we're using Hollinger boxes and folders and also placing acid-free tissue between copies of high school newspapers from the 50s and 60s. For newer papers from the 80s and later, would it be sufficient to use the folders and boxes and not place a tissue sheet in between each edition?
Yes, but keep an eye on them, because as those papers from the 80s and 90s get older, they may need more care. But I think with anything, if you're not seeing a need to add more interventions, then wait. Because yeah, I can see how that would get kind of time consuming and laborious.
And what about filing cabinets versus file boxes? Are there any thoughts? That's the question.
Okay. I mean, if you're actively using records, like a filing cabinet is obviously easier to like pile through stuff, but materials in filing cabinets, even if they're not necessarily being used, every time that filing cabinet opens, they're getting some wear and tear. So it's as you move records out of active usage into like long-term permanent storage, that can be one way of ensuring their longevity. And you can control the microclimate in a box a little bit better than you can a metal cabinet.
We've got a question about how to house vinyl records. They thought about making a DIY box, but their shelves aren't tall enough for the records to stand on. Can you recommend an alternative housing solution? Right now they have them lying flat, sandwiched between glue board and wrapped in paper.
Yeah, so storing vinyl flat is can cause damage from pressure. And I mean it's good that you have them like between board. I mean, I would, if you have like general library shelving, if you can take some of it apart and move some of the shelving so it's up to like the 14 inches you need. That's what I would do. I actually, at one of my previous jobs, we had a really large vinyl collection, and when we put in new shelving, we measured and just made all of the shelving for that range taller so that we could actually fit the boxes that I had a picture of. They just look like really tall Hollinger boxes. And I mean, and I get it, like I get it that sometimes like the ideal isn't possible. I mean, if you do have to store things flat, I would move them or like rotate them or move them around a lot and not do huge stacks. That I guess would be my advice if you can't change your shelving.
Okay. And then, yeah, all of our, we had a question about past webinars. Our webinars are on our YouTube channel. I think our handle is just Backlog Archivist, which is our website. So if you search for us there, and then this will get posted there tomorrow night, and I will email it out to everybody. Jen has done several webinars. We did one on like what happened. Our number one question that we get asked by clients is, we have this stuff and we have no idea where it came from. So we did a webinar on like found in collection. That one was pretty cool that we did this spring. We also did one on finding aids, another one on Dublin core. So we've kind of hit several different topics. And then Jenna did one this summer on handwriting, and we're doing a follow-up one to that next month. And I think that's about it. We've just got a couple of conservators who are in the chat.
And I saw a comment, everything's like moving quite quickly, but not about like not knowing what it is that you need. Yeah, definitely, like if you've got a collection and you're not really sure what you have, do your inventory first rather than just start buying willy-nilly. Unless someone has given you a bucket of money. And that's like, it's okay to like have stuff in sort of temporary housing before you get into your permanent housing.
All right, so we're gonna wrap there. I hope
all of
everybody
the conservators who had lots of really specific ideas.
Yeah. But we will send the recording of this out tomorrow night. And then feel free to email us with any questions. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.